And we're going to start with chapter 1, which is I was a 3-year-old arsonist. Call me Ishmael. I won't answer to it because it's not my name, but it's much more agreeable than most of the things that I've been called. Call me that weird chick that says fuck a lot is probably more accurate, but Ishmael seems classier, and it makes a much more respectable beginning than the sentence I had originally written, which was about how I had just run into my gynecologist at Starbucks, and she looked right past me like she didn't even know me. And so I stood there, wondering whether that's something she does on purpose to make her clients feel less uncomfortable, or whether she just genuinely didn't recognize me without my vagina. Either way, it's very disconcerting when people who have been inside your vagina don't acknowledge your existence. Also, I want to clarify that I don't mean without my vagina, like I didn't have it with me at the time. I meant that I wasn't, displaying it while I was at Starbucks. That's probably understood, but I thought I should clarify because it is the first chapter and you don't know that much about me. So just to clarify, I always have my vagina with me. It's like my American Express card in that I don't leave home without it, not that I use it to buy things with. This book is a true story about me and my battle with leukemia, and, spoiler alert, in the end I die. So you could just read this sentence and then pretend that you read the whole book. Unfortunately, there is a secret word somewhere in this book, and if you don't read all of it, you will not find out the secret word. And then the people in this book club will totally know that you stopped reading after this paragraph and will realize that you're a big fat fake. Okay, fine. The secret word is sausages, the end. Still there? Good. Because the secret word is not sausages, and I don't even know how to spell leukemia, this is a special test that you can use to see who really read the book. If someone in your book club even mentions sausages or leukemia, they are a liar, and you should make them leave, and probably you should frisk them as you're throwing them out, because they may have stolen some of your silverware. The real secret word is fork. I grew up a poor black girl in New York, except replace black with white and New York with rural Texas. The poor part can stay. I was born in Austin, Texas, which is known for its popular Keep Austin Weird campaign, and since I've spent my entire life being pigeonholed as that weird girl, I ended up fitting in there perfectly fine, and I lived happily ever after the end. This is probably what would have happened had we not moved from Austin when I was 3, and that probably would have been the end of my book. I have pretty much no memory of Austin, but according to my mom, we lived in a walk-up apartment near the military base. And late at night, I would stand up in my crib, open the curtains, and attempt to wave soldiers on the street up to my room. My father was one of these soldiers at the time, and when my mom told me the story as a teenager, I pointed out that perhaps she should have appreciated me getting him off the streets like that. Instead, she and my father just moved my crib away from the window because they were concerned that I was, quote, developing an aptitude for that kind of trade. Apparently, I was really distraught about this whole arrangement because the very next week I shoved a broom into the living room furnace, set it on fire, and ran through the apartment screaming and swinging the flaming torch around my head, allegedly. I have no memory of this at all, but if it did happen, I suspect that I was probably waving it around like some kind of awesomely patriotic flaming baton. To hear my mother tell it, I was viciously brandishing it at her as if she was Frankenstein's monster and I was several angry villagers. My mother refers to this as my first arson episode. I refer to it as a lesson why rearranging someone else's furniture is dangerous to everyone. We've agreed to disagree on the wording. Shortly after that incident, we packed up and moved to the small, violently rural town of Wall, Texas. My parents claimed that it was because my dad's enlistment had ended and my mom found herself pregnant with my little sister and wanted to be closer to family. But I suspect it was because they realized there was something wrong with me and believed that growing up in the same small West Texas town they'd grown up in might change me back into a normal person. This was one of many things that they were wrong about. Other things that they were wrong about, the existence of the tooth fairy, the timeless appeal of fake wood paneling, the wisdom of leaving a 3-year-old alone with a straw broom and a furnace. If you compare the wall Texas of today with the wall Texas of my childhood, you would hardly recognize it, because the wall Texas of today has a gas station. And if you think that having a gas station is not that big of a deal, you're probably the kind of person who grew up in a town that has a gas station and that doesn't encourage students to drive to school in their tractors. Wall is basically a tiny town with dirt. There's a lot of dirt and cotton and gin, but not the good kind. In Wall, when people refer to gin, they're talking about the cotton gin, which is the only real business in town and is like a factory that turns cotton into something else. I honestly have no idea. Different cotton, maybe? I never actually bothered to learn because I always figured that within days I would be escaping this tiny country town, and that's pretty much how my entire life went for the next 20 years. Our yearbook theme one year was simply, "Where's Wall?" Because it was the question that you'd get asked every time you told someone that you lived there. The original and more apt theme had been, "Where the fuck is Wall?" But the yearbook teacher quickly shot that down, saying that age-appropriate language was important even at the cost of journalistic accuracy. And, like, if you think I'm kidding, like, seriously, that's a picture of my yearbook, and you can't tell, but it says, "Where's Wall?" I helped create that yearbook. When I was asked where Wall was, I would always answer with a vague, "Oh, that direction," with a wave of my hand, and I quickly learned that if I didn't immediately change the subject to something to break their train of thought, my personal standby, "Look, sea monsters," then they'd ask the inevitable and often incredulous question of, "Why Wall?" And you were never entirely sure whether they were asking why the hell you would choose to live there or why anyone would choose to name a town Wall, but it didn't actually matter because no one seemed to have a legitimate answer for either one of those questions. Unfortunately, pointing out sea monsters was neither subtle nor believable, mostly because we were completely landlocked. So instead, I began compensating for Wall's beigey blandness by making up interesting but unverifiable stories about the small town. "A Wall," I would say, with what I imagined was a sophisticated sneer. "It's the city that invented the dog whistle." Or, "It's the town that Footloose was based on. Kevin Bacon is our national hero." Or, "I'm not surprised you've never heard of it. It's the scene of one of the most gruesome cannibalistic slaughters in American history. We don't talk about it, though. I shouldn't even be mentioning it. Let's never talk about it again." I'd hoped that last one would give me an air of mystery and make people fascinated with our lurid history, but instead it just made people concerned about my mental health, and eventually my mom heard about my tall tales and pulled me aside to tell me that no one was buying it and that the town was most likely named after someone whose last name just happened to be Wall. I pointed out that perhaps he'd been named that because he was the man who had invented walls, and she sighed impatiently, pointing out that it would be hard to believe that a man had invented walls when most of them couldn't even be bothered to close the bathroom door while they're using it. She could tell that I was disappointed at the lack of anything remotely redeeming about our town, and conceded half-heartedly that perhaps the name came from a metaphoric wall designed to keep something out. Progress was my guess. My mother suggested it was more likely boll weevils. I sometimes wonder what it would have been like to have a childhood that was not like mine. I have no real frame of reference, but when I question strangers, I found that their childhood generally has much less blood in it, and also that strangers seem uncomfortable when you question them about their childhood. But what else are you going to talk about in line at the liquor store? Childhood trauma seems like the natural choice, since it's the reason why most of us are in the line to begin with. I've found, though, that people are more likely to share their personal experiences if you go first, which is why I always keep an 11-point list of exactly what went wrong in my childhood to share with them. Also, I usually crack open a bottle of tequila to share with them because alcohol makes me less nervous, and also because I'm from the South, and in Texas we offer drinks to strangers even when we're standing in line at the liquor store. In Texas, we call that Southern hospitality. The people who own the liquor store call it shoplifting, probably because they're Yankees. I'm not allowed to go back in that liquor store. I do have a footnote for this chapter. My editor informs me that this doesn't count as a chapter because nothing relevant happens in it. I explain that this is really because this is just an introduction to the next chapter and probably should be combined with the next chapter, but I separated it because I always find that it's nice to have short chapters that you can finish quickly so that you can feel better about yourself. Plus, if your English teacher assigned you to read the first 3 chapters of this book, you're almost finished with the first 2. And in another 10 minutes, you can go and watch movies about sexy, glittery vampires or whatever the hell you kids are into these days. Also, you should thank your English teacher for assigning you this book because she sounds pretty badass. You should probably give her a bottle from the back of your parents' liquor cabinet and just to thank her for having the balls to choose this book over the Red Badge of Courage, something single malt. You're welcome, English teachers. You totally owe me. Wait, hang on. It just occurred to me that if English teachers assign this book as required reading, that means that the entire school district had to buy a shit ton of my books. So technically I owe you one, English teachers. Except now that I think about it, my tax dollars paid for those books. So technically I'm kind of paying for people to read my own book, and now I don't know whether to be mad or not. This footnote just turned into a goddamn word problem. You know what? Fuck it. Just send me half of the malt liquor you get from your students and we'll call it even. Also, is this the longest footnote in the history of ever? Answer, probably. And then we start chapter 2, but I'm not reading it because you have to buy the book, or at least go to the library, or shoplift it. So anyway, I'll see you soon.